Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Dan Martin. I'm the Safe Community Coordinator for the Village of New Lenox. I really appreciate you being here for this event. This has been about 8 or 9 months in the works. So for all the organizations that participated in the planning of this, I truly appreciate it, and I appreciate all of you coming out tonight. We're just a few minutes behind, so I'll keep my remarks very brief. We've got a great panel this evening. We really appreciate these speakers being here tonight. And with that, our first speaker up is Mayor Tim Baldermann from the Village of New Lenox.
Thank you. Dan is always very modest. In reality, you see all this out here today and all the great people that have been organized, and there are a lot of people who are responsible for that. But for us here at the Village, it starts with Dan Martin. He does a tremendous job. I would say, Dan, thank you very much for all you do. Just before I make a couple of brief remarks, I want to say thank you to the New Lenox Safe Community Coalition and its Substance Use Task Group. Lincoln Way High School, of course, District 210, they're always such wonderful hosts. We appreciate that. Our sponsors that made it possible for us to advertise this event here tonight, the Gateway Foundation, our good friends at Hero, Rosenkrantz, Cemetria, University of Chicago Medicine, Ingalls Memorial. Our speakers, and I look at the panel and they're obviously very busy in their lives, but they've taken the time to come out because it's such an important topic to discuss, so we're grateful that they are here. And all of the vendors, that room out there is full. All of those participating organizations that came out, and they're going to be back out there when this is finished. There's some great information out there, so we're very, very grateful that they were here. Here in New Lenox, I can tell you that from the very beginning, I've been the mayor now for a little over 12 years, when we started to see a spike in heroin overdoses, hitting not only young people, but people of all ages, people of all walks of life. There's no particular demographic. What we did here was we tackled it head on. I was a policeman for 22 years, and I ran a task force and a tactical unit, and I dealt with a lot of narcotics cases. And it was frustrating back then in the 90s to see that really the only option that was prevalent at the time was enforcement by the police and putting people in a criminal justice system. And there's certainly a place for that. There will always be a place for that. For those people who are selling narcotics, that are pushing narcotics, there's a place for law enforcement to be involved. But quite often I saw people that I knew were just really good people that were struggling, that were dealing with issues, and unfortunately for one reason or another turned to some sort of substance and ended up abusing that. And I knew that these were not, maybe by law they were criminals, but not really. In their heart they weren't. They were people that needed help, they needed some assistance. And so over this past decade plus, as this substance abuse problem has become more prevalent, not only here in Will County, but across the country, we decided that we would deal with it very humanely, but very forcefully. And so we're proud of the partners that we have. We're very proud of our Safe Communities Coalition and all of the great work that they do. And again, as mayor, I'm fortunate that there are so many good people that really make our community look good and stand out, and I couldn't be any prouder. So thank you all for taking time out of your busy lives to be here on this important topic, and I look forward to hearing from our speakers as well. Thank you. Have a great night. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Holly Pierson from Lincoln Way West High School. Doctor.
Hi there, I'm Holly Pierson. I'm the PBS director here at Lincoln Way West High School. And on behalf of Lincoln Way District 210 and Lincoln Way West High School, we are so glad to have all of you here today. I'm a member of our Safe Communities Coalition, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart, so I'm so excited to see all of you here today. And it's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker. We have Jessie Jessie Rose Monreal. Thank you.
Hi. I just want to thank Dan for reaching out to me and asking me to speak here. This is something that's really important to me. This has been important to me for a long time for various reasons. I am a person in recovery myself, which is why Dan asked me to speak. I had 6 years of sobriety on July 30th of this year, just about a couple weeks ago. Thank you. Thank you. So I do want to speak a little bit about my addiction. I don't want to spend too much time on that part of it, though, only because that gets distracting. We all know that it's ugly. We all know that it turns people into things that they're not proud of. And I think it's a little bit more important to focus on the recovery part. But this morning, I got to take my son to his first day of middle school. He's sitting up here right now. And without my sobriety, that's not something I'd have been able to do. I know that the path that I was on and what it had turned into for me, had it continued for another 6 years, it wouldn't have continued for another 6 years, and I would not have been seeing my son off to school this morning. I would have not been here. And this is not an easy thing for anybody involved in it. It wasn't easy for me personally. It wasn't easy for my family to watch. It wasn't easy for anybody involved, and it isn't. This is a big, complex thing, and it requires a lot of change and a lot of education. Like probably a lot of the people in our communities who have gotten addicted to substances, you know, I came from a background that did have a lot of addiction involved in it, and I do have a formal education. I do have an associate's degree in addiction studies, and I do have a CADC, but most of what I know about addiction came from my life. And I lost my mother a month before my 17th birthday to suicide because my mother was an alcoholic and an addict. And 11 years later, I lost my uncle, also to suicide, also because of addiction. And losing two of the people who were closest to me in my life that way, I don't know how to convey that pain to you, but I do know that unfortunately, drugs and alcohol are very effective at what they do, which is take away pain. And they're so effective at it that for myself and for a lot of the kids who we have lost, when it starts too early, it's the only thing that you learn to depend on for how to get through anything. And then you get older, and the thing that you use to solve all of your problems starts causing you problems, and then you need more of it. And this is what it looks like. And it does turn the people that you love, or if I know there's a lot of people here in recovery, it turns you into somebody that you don't even know what you're looking at anymore. You know, if you would have asked me 6 years ago when I walked into that treatment facility, intoxicated, 100 pounds, on death's door, you would have never convinced me that I would have been standing here doing something like this. I didn't even believe that I could keep it together for 5 minutes. But there are choices that we have to make every single day as recovering addicts. And in the beginning, those choices are hard. In the beginning, I had to walk by 5 bars to go to an AA meeting. It's not set up to support us, unfortunately, right now, and it's getting better because of things like this. You know, there's social media, which helps and hurts. There are people on there who use it to break stigmas, and there are people on there who use it to slander people with drug addictions. And what I will say to the people out here who are in recovery about that is don't read that shit. Just don't. Sorry, I was gonna try not to swear. I can't do that for 10 minutes. don't read it. It's not of any use to you. Things like this are really important, and if you had gotten a chance to stop and talk to any of the people at the tables, Gateway, Rosecrans, I'm sure Stepping Stones is here. I did work for Stepping Stones for 4 years. I just left there. The people who are out there fighting this, whether they're in treatment facilities or whether they're people in long-term recovery who are sponsoring other people, please understand what those people do on a daily basis, because you do not get sober alone. You do not stay sober alone. It doesn't have to look like anything specific. Everybody's is different, but it can't happen without everybody working together and without everybody talking about the problem and talking about the problem in an effective way and being very careful to avoid shortcuts. Because if there's anything that I've learned and everything that I went through and fought through in my recovery, don't look for shortcuts in anything. Don't look for the easiest path. Don't just medicate the symptoms. You have to deal with the problem. You know, this is an overdose awareness event, and there are medications that help people. But there are also medications that hurt people when they're not taken properly. And we have to be aware of that, and we have to be honest about that. And we have to support our family members when maybe they're struggling to find out that they're going to have to. I had to learn to manage anxiety without medication. I don't have that option. I'm an addict. I can't put drugs in my body that alter my state. So maybe you have anxiety, maybe you have depression, maybe you don't. Maybe you just need to learn how to live better, and then those things will be alleviated for you. But that doesn't happen overnight. And if you start throwing meds at a problem or labeling it and misdiagnosing it, it never, ever, ever goes away. We should be empowering people to really work on what's going on. We have to be very careful not to label people's trauma as a mental illness, because when you label trauma as a mental illness, you don't deal with it the right way. And as an addiction professional, I saw so much of that, and it really hurt people to be told, this is what you are, and this is what you should do about it, when maybe there would have been a better way and a longer lasting way that would have allowed them to flourish as a person. I was able to do that because I chose to look at the things that hurt me the worst, because they controlled me my whole life, and I didn't want that anymore. So, you know, whether you are a family member, or whether you are someone who's in recovery, or whether you are a person who works for a facility, you know, we all kind of have to lock arms and do this together. We don't need to stand here and argue about whether it's a disease or not. We don't need to stand here and, that's irrelevant, really. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about the problem? Let's stop arguing about the right way and the wrong way, and start figuring out what works. Stop sweeping things under the rug. Stop labeling people, stop stigmatizing people, and start encouraging people to do the hard work that is required to be better. And there are a couple of people here that I was really happy to see, and it meant a lot to me to get to work with some of the people that I got to work with, and to see them make the changes, and to see them do the hard work, and to have them here tonight means a lot to me. And also to, again, the people who work in the addiction field are angels. And I hope everybody knows that who's here. It is not an easy job. And they're not doing it for fun or for money or for anything else. They're doing it because they know it's what they're supposed to do, and they're good at it, and it takes pieces of us away. So please, any chance you get, appreciate those people. And again, thank you to Dan and everyone here for asking me to be a part of this. I'm really grateful for that. So the next person who I'm going to introduce is going to be Dr. Joseph Beck. He is the medical director at University of Chicago Medicine, Ingalls Memorial Addiction Treatment. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Joe Beck, and I'm medical director at University of Chicago, Ingalls Memorial, and we have a teaching and research-based addiction program that essentially runs all levels of care there. So we can do detoxification all the way till 28 weeks of treatment, and we do that on an open unit, which is different from some other hospital-based addiction recoveries, which does not involve locked doors like psychiatry, which I think is an important distinction for treating everybody and separating out that there are some highly acute psychiatric patients, and addiction is an entirely different disease. We are responsible for training residents out of the University of Chicago, and we try to therefore model assessment and treatment in the best way possible, which is certainly a multifactorial assessment and treatment model. We do not simply rely on medications, although they are certainly in the initial phases of treatment a necessity for a significant majority of patients, and as you get to know patients and further assess them, you can tailor a treatment program, often in accordance with their wishes on how much they rely on medication, but also in line with the evidence that we can get from larger studies on how people do when they're being treated with both psychotherapy, 12-step-based treatment, and medication management. Our curriculum is essentially taken from Hazelden. We do some dialectical behavioral therapy and again, tailor certain therapeutic options for patients depending on their willingness to engage in treatment and what we think may be best utilized by them. Just because it looks like I'm sort of the medication person here today, to talk about what is available and what's working in the community, especially with the opioid scourge. I think probably everyone in this room is familiar with Suboxone agonist treatment, which certainly when it came out was treated essentially as a panacea and has really caused a problem all its own. In some ways when it's not paired effectively with psychotherapy and other modalities in treatment. It is initially potentially very helpful for patients, and sometimes there are no other choices. And in certain populations, such as the chronic pain populations, it can be very efficacious, but I would hesitate to bring yourself or loved ones to places that are only offering agonist-based treatment and not talking to you about other options. I think as of late for opioid addiction, the use of Vivitrol, which unlike being an opioid, is an opioid receptor blockade that's given once monthly by injection, which helps with medication adherence, and we can get families involved in helping patients engage in medication therapy around these injections, can be extremely helpful without continuing to expose the brain to opioids, which can promote relapse in some ways. Alcohol has also come a long way as far as treatment. No, there is no treatment for alcohol that has been shown to keep people abstinent, save Antabuse, which has been around for 25 years, and that is a fear-based medication that will make you ill if you take it in the morning and you drink later that day. We don't generally these days try to do fear-based recovery. So there are two other medications, acamprosate, known as Camprol, and naltrexone, which interestingly is the same drug that we give for opioids in Vivitrol that has been shown to reduce craving in alcoholic patients and also reduce the amount that people drink when they relapse. And so that has helped in a totally other subset of the population, which could be somewhat controversial if we're dealing with all abstinence-based treatment, but in a harm reduction sense, these drugs are very useful for alcohol. So enough about medications. I think also it's important in treatment to look at underlying factors leading to addiction. It is not all genetic. It is not all psychosocial. Those two things certainly interact in every patient in a unique way, which needs to be assessed. And then any special considerations, pain and psychiatric diagnoses need to be taken into account. And treatment plans need to be comprehensive, and they need to be longitudinal. We do not, unfortunately, the medical system in our society is split up, and all the reimbursement and all these macro things are based on how many times you see a person, not how well you take care of a person. And addiction treatment does not lend itself to that. There needs to be a quarterback in treatment, and there needs to be a care plan that is going to take them through different phases of recovery. And I hope that when you're looking for treatment, you're looking at a center or a group that is willing to go with you the entire way to try and get there. I will take questions at the end, and I appreciate your time. Okay. Okay, next is John Roberts from Hero.
Lost one already. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm John Roberts. I'm the president and one of the founders of Hero. And I mean this, I am so honored to be here, to have been allowed to speak tonight. I want to start by thanking all of you. I mean, this is your night. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. It's important to me, but it's important to us. We're fighting the fight, and we're going to continue to fight it. So as I go on in my comments, you'll find why we call this Your Light Still Shines. Anybody who's lost someone knows why we say that. I also am honored and really delighted because it gives me a chance to say thank you to so many people, not just you guys, but to all the people who have worked with and supported Hero for 10 years. We're getting old, I am at least. But I'll tell you what, we've been doing this for 10 years, and along the way, I didn't do this by myself. I had a lot of help from my friends, and as I call them, my Hero families. So tonight I'd like to thank a few of them, and they're right here on the stage with me. I don't know if you saw the newspaper article last week. Somebody pointed it out to me today. They had seen it. I'd like to thank Mayor Tim Baldermann, Chief Robert Sturber, Deputy Chief Lou Alessandrini, and Deputy Chief April DeSandro. They're all from the New Lenox Police Department. But they surprised me recently. We were out for the National Night Out here in New Lenox. We work very closely with this wonderful city and community. And the chief said, I want you to give me a call, but it turns out he had a donation for us of $2,500. And by the way, not taxpayer dollars. Those were seized assets, seized money from dope dealers. And he gave it to us, so that money is being turned around now to help people. So I'd like to thank the chief and the mayor. But it's not the first time. If you were here last year, I called New Lenox a model community. I meant it then and I mean it now. New Lenox has been working with us and fighting this damn epidemic for years and years. You saw our trailer when you came in. Take a close look. There's some names on there, and one of them is the Village of New Lenox. When we were trying to start something, a community outreach program, they didn't hesitate to offer some asset forfeiture money, but they pitched in and helped us buy the trailer, and then we did the work and the outfitting. But, good friends, you always know your friends when you're really up against it, they step up. So, Mayor, thank you very much. And then another really good friend, he was there at our first event in 2010, 2011, but our inaugural event in Homer Glen, State's Attorney Jim Glasgow. He's been fighting the fight long before he stepped up to work with HERO, but Jim Glasgow and the State's Attorney's Office and folks from Will County have been with us for 10 years in fighting. So, you know, again, take a look at that trailer. His name is on it too. More so, last year, you know that big, beautiful truck that's pulling the trailer? Jim helped us get that by contacting a local car dealership. And yeah, the man is very generous, and but he made it possible. Jim pulled that all together. You know, I can't say how grateful I am to this man and all that he's done. He makes a difference. Thank you, Jim. And I didn't even try and outdress him this time. I never win. Best dresser I've ever seen. Dr. Kathleen Burke is up here on this stage too, a dear friend. She too, I mean, I've been working with Kathleen since 2010. Back when I was asked to work with her, she was developing a program for schools, for our children, so that we could teach our kids how to be, you know, to make them safe, to teach them about substance abuse. Dr. Burke has also helped in so many other things, but like we work a lot. You had the naloxone training tonight. We do that too. Actually, Kathleen trained me, and now HERO is now out training like she is, not just training the people who come to our family support. Now we're all over the place, just like Kathleen. So Kathleen, thank you very much. You'll see on the notes, but Kathleen is also Will County now, and man, are we lucky to have her. You know, New Lenox and Will County, you are served well by these people here. They're fighting this damn epidemic, and we will win. The last people I'd like to mention, they've already been mentioned, but you know, they made this possible. Dan Martin, the safety community coordinator, and our executive director, Jan Dombrowski. Those two. They work long and hard to keep this community safe, and we're so delighted to be a part of the things they do. We support them and they support us. You know, this is a model community. I just wish other communities would follow their lead. So it's with all sincerity that I thank you so much for helping to save lives. You guys aren't just friends, you're heroes. I'd like to share a few stories with you tonight about HERO. I get to do that as the president, but you know, we started in 2010. I think you know why. We're called the two dads, John Roberts and Brian Kirk. We both lost teenage sons in 2009. Neither of us could sit still and just let that happen and not warn the other families in Homer Glen. And you know, so we started doing something. We had to. We knew the pain. There are people in this audience, they know the pain. In our case, we're trying to protect those poor families who, like ours and so many others, are caught unaware by this growing epidemic, and they're either making our kids sick, our loved ones sick, or they're killing our kids. I couldn't sit still. Earlier this year, Brian Kirk retired 10 years to the day of his son's death. But in those 10 years, that man and his wife, Marie, worked tirelessly to protect other families. I'm the guy who gave Brian his name, the first hero. I don't know if you know the story, I've told it many times, but Brian Kirk's son, Matthew, died at the age of 18, April 3rd, 2009. And my Billy, who was 19, died September 20th, 2009. I didn't know Brian, but he came to my son's memorial. So April, September. Brian comes to my son's memorial, talks to my wife, and he says, I know what you've been through and what you're about to go through. I'm here to help. So Brian set aside his own grief to come out and help another family from his community. And Brian's simple gesture of kindness and caring is actually the symbolic foundation of all of HERO's work. You see, our primary mission is to help families with the hope that they might avoid suffering the same fate that our two families suffered due to substance abuse. And from this alliance of two grieving fathers, Hero proudly can now proudly proclaim that we have actively fought it for 10 years. And over those 10 years, we've been joined by some really great, incredible people with such passion and energy. So it isn't just us, but we fought this battle, and we fought it on several fronts. After that inaugural march in Homer Glen, we started right away. We started holding what we thought was important. Out in the community helping our families, we started family support. And here in New Lenox, every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, come rain or shine, we're going to be there. We hired from one of our local treatment providers, D'Amico and Associates. They just changed their name, and Carla, our counselor, is somewhere here tonight. Thank you, Carla. But you know, every Tuesday night we're there waiting for our families to show up, just to be there for them and help them to understand this epidemic, the disease, and anything we can do to help them and their family get through it. Miraculously, a few years back, just by luck, Heroin Anonymous came and joined with us. They have their meetings the same night at Lincoln Way Christian Church here on Tuesday nights. So think about it. Family members can come and get the support they need from Hero, and HA is there helping their friends and clients to continue their recovery. It's the perfect partnership. And they do their work whether we're there or not, but HA, thank you so much for the work you do. I recognize a lot of faces here from our grief support. We've also been holding grief support now for the last several years, and not here in New Lenox. We did this in Orland. We meet at the Calvary Church at 16100 104th Avenue. Families come there. We have a grief counselor, board members always there, and we just talk. But we help them through the worst period of their life. There's families, and there are people in this audience that know what I'm talking about. The pain is exquisite. It's unrelenting. So we meet there on the first and third Tuesday, and we just offer a compassionate ear to our Hero families. And we've helped an awful lot of people over the years on their grief journey. Another program that we're really proud of, I already mentioned, Kathleen Burke trained me. We have been doing it for years, but I said we can do better. I mean, the day that I'm in charge of anything and I don't say we can do better, I better hang it up and go home. But we expanded our Narcan training program. Stuff's very expensive, but my time is free. I'll go anywhere to help save a life. So we've been doing that now. Kathleen helped and has helped many times. We collaborate on this, but we wanted to expand the program, so we weren't just doing it at the church, at Lincoln Way Christian Church. Now we're doing it at police departments, schools, wherever we're asked to go, we're willing to go and train. By the end of our first year as a state-certified member of the DOP program, we had trained 500 people and given out just about as much Narcan. So thanks to all the people who donate money to help us do that. But we save lives is one of our mottos, and we're very proud of it. I mentioned too our drug trailer, the trailer, the hidden in plain sight trailer. I told you how we came about acquiring that trailer. Several thousand people have gone through that trailer. We've gone as far as Nashville, Illinois with that trailer. Someday we want to go down to Springfield and show the lawmakers. But we had 7,000 people go through that, and not one adult, it's only for adults, goes through there that we don't tell them about the grave nature of this epidemic. Not many people know that as of 2018, we've lost 800,000 American citizens to drug overdose deaths. 800,000 people. People aren't aware of it. We're trying to make them aware of it. And the other thing we tell them is how we want them to understand how important and vital their role is to make their kids safe. I tell them every time I speak to them, open that door. Let your kids know they can talk to you. I mean, parents are probably parents, teachers, there's so many people that can play an important role. Parents play a vital role. And then another program I must mention, because I'm really proud of it, Last year, the board also approved a request I made, let's expand our drug education program. And we would typically visit maybe a dozen schools a year. Well, last year we visited 37 schools. We spoke to thousands and thousands of children, teachers, faculty, and parents. We brought our trailer out. We did whatever we could to teach people about this epidemic and how it's killing too many people, and it's something in this country we cannot and must not tolerate. I've said for years, we've become complacent and too tolerant of drugs and substance abuse in this nation. And I offer as evidence, think of all the films you've seen where they glamorize drug use, and our kids sit there and watch that. Is there any wonder why so many kids, half of all high school seniors will try some substance before they get to senior year? We've got to stop that. Well, how do you stop it? In our schools. So I went to those schools along with the two moms, Kim White from Frankfurt and Kathy Dyer, and we would go in and just tell our story to these kids, and you could hear a pin drop. These kids hear the story. So we're making a difference, but I'd like to give you some hero-breaking news. This previous Monday, I had occasion to be at Stepping Stone's grand opening of their new administrative center. Senator Pat McGuire from 43rd District, Joliet, Will County, was there. I was prepared to see him. I handed him a 4-page law, and I'm asking him to make drug education in every middle school and high school every year mandatory. As soon as we can get this law passed, our kids will not go through those highly vulnerable teenage years anymore without being told about how dangerous these damn drugs are. So I hope you'll support that. As a nation, we have to change those attitudes. Beliefs and attitudes are where our behavior comes from. We have to get in there. We have to teach our kids. We have to inculcate those the healthy attitudes and beliefs about drugs in all of our kids. It may take 10 years to really see the numbers dropping, but you know what? It took 10 years to get this bad. I'm long on patience, and I'm long on fighting it. I will keep fighting this fight until we see these numbers dropping. You know, the scary part is, 20 to 22 million people, they estimate, need drug treatment in our country right now. 1 in 10, just about 1 in 10 U.S. citizens need drug treatment. This is an epidemic, and it's a serious one. Unfortunately, it didn't get the attention that other diseases did, like cancer and heart disease. Well, that's got to change. Those are some of the beliefs and attitudes that we also have to change. If we don't, I won't even go there. So I'm asking for your support, and I'd like to think that, like these good people to my right, I know that there are people out there that would like to help. Why do I do this work? I'd like to share with you the day after my son died. My wife and 3 children gathered around the dining room table, worst day of our life. And the thing that bothers me most is that Billy's unfinished life. He was 19 years old. All the things that I knew he was going to do and enjoy and the people he could have helped, all of that was lost. So I asked my family, we've got to do 2 things. Lead our lives a little bit more fully and be mindful of all those things that Billy can't do or will no longer be able to do, and to lead our lives better and more fully. And by doing that, especially me, I do everything in Billy's name. It might give Billy just another day of life, one more day of influence in this world that he once flourished in. It keeps Billy with me. His light still shines. It shines every day. I'm so sorry Billy did not get the chance to live out his life. I know there are many people here tonight who know what I'm talking about, because you too have lost someone near and dear to your heart. After 10 years of doing this work, we've come a long way. And it's not, again, I'm going to do this work until I join Billy, but I couldn't have accomplished, and Hero couldn't have accomplished any of these things without the help of our friends. And why I say thank you to them is because they allow me to keep Billy with me every day and to give him just another day on this beautiful earth. So to all of our volunteers, I would like to say, and supporters and friends, I'd like to say thank you. I've described all of our programs for a reason. Our success now is wonderful. People ask me, how are you doing? I said, we're doing great. Hero is growing and growing, and more programs. And now we need more help. We need volunteers. So I'm asking all of you, especially the families here who, like me, you know, if you're looking for a way to move through your grief, perhaps you would consider joining Hero. So I would ask you, stop at our Hero table and fill out a volunteer card. Our volunteers might only work an hour or two a month, but I've talked with all of them, and they all say how meaningful and rewarding the work is to them, because like me, it allows them to give back and to help fight the epidemic. So if you'd like to do that, please stop at our table. And I understand we have a lot of busy people here. And if you're unable to find the time to volunteer, if you would consider making a donation, that's the lifeblood of Hero. And we're one of those charities, I boast about this all the time, about 98% of all money over 10 years goes to our programs. We take no money, we're volunteers. So I would like you to think about that. If you want, you can make a donation at the table, or you can go to theherofoundation.org. And with that, I'd like to close I took a little bit longer, I apologize. I'd like to close my comments as I always have over the last 10 years. Please be a hero and help save a life. Thank you. I don't always break down like that, but this one got me, I'm sorry. I'd like to introduce my good friend and the next speaker, and a great state's attorney for the Will County, Jim Glasgow.
Can you all hear me? I don't like microphones if I can avoid it. John Roberts is the heart and soul of the battle that we've been waging against opioids for the last 10 years. And you can see the passion that he brings to this. We have the HERO organization and the HELPS organization that was formed by Larry Walsh of the health department. And we've had a coalition every meeting, every year since 2012, drawing 300 to 400 people of all different disciplines, from sociology, psychology, prosecution, law enforcement. And there's not another county that can match what we're doing. And just to show you how devastating this problem is, 10 years ago we only had 17 fatal overdoses. The last 3 years we've been averaging 80 to 85, and we're on the same pace again this year. Now, it probably would be higher if it wasn't for the work of Kathleen Burke with her Narcan education throughout the county. So that's been huge. We've also done a lot more with regards to education, like we're doing here tonight. But this problem is something like we've never faced. It's really a health epidemic. Has anybody ever seen the movie French Connection? Popeye Doyle was the star of that. And in French Connection 2, a lot of young people don't know what I'm talking about, but he was the toughest investigator in the city of New York. And he went over to France to bust the cartel. Well, they kidnapped him, and they duct taped him to a chair, and they shot him up with heroin. And they owned him. The toughest, roughest law enforcement official you'll ever want to meet, and he was addicted to heroin. And I can stand before you and tell you the same thing with myself. If I took heroin, I wouldn't be myself. It alters your brain chemistry, and you are not yourself. You can't control your actions. When I talk to the young kids that come through drug court, our drug court's been phenomenal. When I wrote the drug court grant back in 1998, I never imagined that it would be the tool that it is today to help fight the opioid epidemic. And we have about a 90% success rate with the kids that come through the drug court, which is phenomenal. But in talking with them, they tell me that it's 2, 3, 4 months in the Will County Jail before the fog lifts, and I remember who I really am, and that I really care about myself and want to do something about it. So, you know, it's sad, you know, if you go just a 30-day inpatient, again, I'm not going to criticize a 30-day inpatient because they're professionals and they do great work, but it's so difficult in that short period of time to rid the demons. And I've got one young man who he kind of stumbled in drug court and had to go a little longer, but he's really a bright young man, and he's been asking. He told me, he said, if it wasn't for drug court, I'd be dead, and I'd like to give back. And I think we're going to try and see if he'll be a spokesperson for us to tell his story. And this is a kid that came from privilege. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. This stuff is controlling in a way like we've never seen. And we've changed our attitude in law enforcement from prosecution to prevention and treatment. And I use my drug forfeiture money that I seized from the bad guys and try to turn it back. As you heard John Roberts say, one of my favorite things is to give hero money. But I've also used the money recently. There were half a dozen municipalities in Will County that didn't have a drug canine. And Shorewood, Shanahan, Rockdale, Elwood, Park Forest, and Wilmington. In fact, Wilmington just had an incident yesterday where they used their canine. But in today's society, those canines are so critical for 2 reasons. First, to get the drug dealers off the street, but secondly, for prevention, to run the dog through the schools, to find drugs in a locker, not to arrest the child, but to get the drugs away from them, get their parents in, and get them into counseling. That's absolutely critical. So our whole mindset has changed, and again, it's been for the better. There's so many things that we do in law enforcement. The number of drug dealers that went to prison when we first detected this epidemic, it quadrupled. So our undercover officers, who do a fantastic job in this county, by the way, the Joliet Police Department, Will County Sheriff, Bolingbrook have great TAC units out on the street, and the Metropolitan Narcotics Squad, and they just do fantastic work, and they've got informants. You can't sell heroin in this county at any level for very long without somebody finding out about it. And then we aggressively work with law enforcement to do undercover buys and make sure that those people are shut down. We don't have the density of population that they do up in Chicago, where it's an endless stream. A social worker came up to me at one of our conferences and said, Mr. Glasgow, if you'll get in my car with me when we're done here, I can take you up to a gas station and we can buy as much heroin as we want and nobody will stop us. And I've heard that story over and over again, and we know that there's a thing called the Heroin Highway, where our young people here, and they can't get their drugs here locally, and we do our damnedest to make sure they can't. 40-minute drive, and they've got whatever they need. And I don't know what the answer is. We've met with Chicago PD. In fact, John Roberts and I met with Chicago PD, and offering to, maybe use some of our undercover officers on a sting up there, but it never came to fruition. So that's something we can't stop. So we've got to work with our young people, and if you've got a child, make sure that you go through John's trailer and learn how to search your children's room. They don't have any right of privacy in your house, in the bedroom that you provide for them. Don't let them tell you any differently. You truly have a moral obligation as a parent to be tough on this and to shake their room down. And the hiding places that they have today, the commodities that you see on their dresser, hairspray or deodorant or toothpaste, don't just look at it and think it's the real thing. Pick it up and look at it. There's a clone for every commodity that we have today on the internet with a hiding place in it. I don't know, did any of you go through the trailer? If you didn't, you should go through it before you leave. I've got a bottle of water in my trunk, and it looks like an Aquafina bottle. Water in the top, water in the bottom. Twist it, you open it. There's a big empty space behind the label about this big where you can put all kinds of things. So if law enforcement goes in and they're looking to do a search, they see 5 cases of water. In the middle one, there could be a whole bunch of phony bottles of water in there full of drugs. And that's where the drug dogs come in, and they're so critical. They'll hit on that. But the officers would have to go through every single bottle in those cases, and normally that's not something that'd be a priority. But you can't trust anything you see today, unfortunately. I was born in 1950, and when I was a kid, there was nothing to get in trouble. I mean, the worst thing we ever did was throw a snowball at a car. And so I shudder when I think of what kids have available to them today on the internet. They don't have the maturity, the education, and life experiences to understand what they're seeing and what they're reading, and the prefrontal cortex in our brains doesn't become completely developed until we're 25 years old. And yet these kids are being inundated with all kinds of information that's poisonous. So the more that you can do to monitor their phones, which is basically a computer, the better off they will be. And make sure that you do keep an eye on their rooms. When they come home late at night, give them a big hug and take an inhale. See if you smell anything. Look at their eyes. I mean, it sounds silly, but that works. And I've been very fortunate. I have 5 kids, and never once did I smell alcohol in their breath or smell marijuana or anything else when they came in after hours. So take a blessing on that one. My youngest 18-year-old just took him to the University of Iowa on Tuesday, and I couldn't ask for a better young man. And but again, at any minute, he could wind up meeting the wrong person and fall prey to this stuff. And that's why we have the new marijuana law that's, we saw it coming. But just like alcohol, marijuana is a gateway drug. Don't fool yourself. And if you're at a party, a young person at a party, and your judgment is down when somebody shows up with this white powder and says, hey, you gotta try this. Because that's the problem with heroin. You don't have to just inject it. You can snort it or you can smoke it. And there was a saying on the party scene, well, if you're just snorting it and smoking it, you're not an addict, you're only an addict if you inject it. You're an addict if you use it. And so many young people have died on the first use because the potency is so incredibly high. So I can't give you a more dire warning for your children. And you saw John Roberts' emotions that he showed you here today, and he doesn't normally do that. But when I dropped my son off, I thought about his son, Billy, and I thought how lucky I am that my 18-year-old son is still with me. But he has spent the last 10 years of his life with no pay. He does this all on his own time. And God knows how many lives he's saved. So I just want to end my presentation with another gift for Hero. We seized these items in various drug raids. And so, Don, this is something that you can maybe put on display in your trailer to show parents the various paraphernalia that's out there. These new Juul electronic cigarettes, they're garbage. In fact, there's studies showing now that just the gases that come out of them are worse than the smoke from a cigarette. And it can do serious damage to your lungs regardless of whatever you're smoking, whether it be a flavor, but you can put any drug in these things also. Marijuana, heroin, it doesn't, it's one ruse after another, and they're always targeting our kids. These things are geared to, in fact, I have to confess, my 18-year-old, we found one in his backpack. So just about every kid has probably tried it. So you got to talk to your kids about this, because this is really a gateway to some really bad things. So, John, hopefully you can use that as
The real deal.
Dr. Kathleen Burke that I mentioned earlier, she's our next presenter.
Thank you. Every time I'm with these two, they're giving each other gifts. I just don't know how to compete with that. First, I'm the cleanup hitter, okay? So I want to point out this phenomenal group of people as a collective who work together to make people's lives better and to keep people alive. You didn't have this 5-6 years ago. This is something that has come together, that we all work together, and we all get things done. And that's what it's all about with Will County, right, is getting things done. There are folks in this audience who are staffing the tables and who are running support groups that get things done. And it's all of that collaboration that makes a difference, that keeps people alive. I want to tell you that our focus in my office has been the wraparound services for recovery. That first it was accessing recovery through our treatment facilities. Stepping Stones is here, and they are phenomenal with receiving everybody, regardless of ability to pay. But there's a limit to how many people can get into a facility. We don't want that to happen. We want to give choices to people. We want to have outpatient, we want to have inpatient, and we want to have recovery services with support groups. So we have a program that's in our police departments called Safe Passage Network. 10 of those police departments, one of which is New Lenox. If you need help, you go and you ask for help, and they will get you into treatment immediately. The second thing that we've introduced in Will County is what we call a warm handoff. I know anyone who's gone through the emergency rooms realize it's a crazy place. Emergency rooms are not necessarily meant to keep people there for any period of time. But when folks overdose and they have an opportunity to reach out to someone and facilitate that transfer to treatment, magic happens. And so we now have in both St. Joseph's and Silver Cross people who are there for a warm handoff to help people get into treatment. Not 24 hours a day, that's my goal, but not yet, but we're getting there. Those two programs have increased the access that people have to get care. The next thing that we're working on, and we're modeling it after drug court and their recovery homes, are recovery homes for folks in the community, particularly women and their children. And Stepping Stones is going to be expanding by adding a recovery home for women and children in the next year or two. And we hope to add in a second one. I was also told tonight that Common Ground is adding a women's support recovery home. This is phenomenal because these are the things that we need. And we all are here to support one another. So my point tonight is, as a community, we get things done. We want to hear from those in need, tell me what the problem is, and we will all figure it out. Thank you for having us here tonight. Thank you for this event. It's a phenomenal event every year, and I'm very, very blessed to be part of it. Speaking of blessed, I am now going to introduce our Billy Knott, our pastor from Revolution Church. Please welcome Bill.
Thank you, Dr. Burke. Appreciate that. Before we close, I just want to share one thing with you. This is a big deal. This is a big deal for our kids. This is a big deal for our parents, grandparents, and myself. I haven't used it in a long time. In fact, as of today, I'm 29 years, 1 month, and 18 days clean. So it's been, appreciate that. I understand the struggle, and one of the things that I thought I'd share with you, it's uncanny that it came up today, but I knew this is what I was going to speak to you about briefly in about a 2-minute span, and it came up today while I was at church with a couple of folks on staff and a couple of friends, and it's something I want to share with you, and many of you already know this, but we all, when we lose somebody or when we're dealing with something like we are here with this epidemic, we go through grief, and it's perfectly okay to do that. And we have to understand, and many of you already know this, but there's 5 basic stages of grief, and you may be finding yourself having a hard time moving from one to another, or even at times moving backwards is what it seems like, because it's so hard to understand how we could lose somebody, how these things could happen. But just in case you don't know, the 5 basic stages of grief are as follows. And everyone goes through this, whether you lose somebody or whether you get the call for yourself from the doctor that something's going on with your health. And the first one is denial. Many of us are familiar with this. No, I don't have a problem. No, this isn't really happening to me or to my loved one. And then, of course, we come to the second stage, which is anger. We become angry about what's happening. We're no longer denying it, but instead we're fighting and we're angry about what's happening to us. We're angry about what's happening to our family member. And after we pass that, we go into a stage where we call it deal making, where you're trying to, God, if you just fix this, I will. Or if I can just get this to go away or this to stop, then I will do this. It's like you're trying to make a deal with what's happening to you or what's happening with your family members. That's the third stage. And then from there, when that doesn't work, we fall into the fourth stage, which is depression, which is loneliness, where you withdraw from everybody and everything. And everybody goes through it differently, so it might look different depending on who you are. And after that stage, you come to the stage of what's called acceptance. And this can happen, I said, as I was saying earlier, for ourselves. If you get that call from the doctor and the numbers didn't come back right and they didn't quite get everything when you had that surgery and you don't know how much time you've got left, or maybe you know that you're at the end, and I know people in this category, and you finally come to the point where you accept it. You're ready, and this is just where you're at in life. And the big part that I think is breaking a lot of people's hearts today, as we were out there standing next to the tables with all the pictures of the children and the adults and everybody else that have been lost to these epidemics, is that we have to sit in this spot of acceptance, looking at these pictures and knowing that we have to continue to move on. But the encouragement that I want to give you today is that none of this has to be in vain. There's an incredible team of people that are here that are resources for this community. There's amazing things that are happening with the HERO organization and with the law enforcement organizations and with everything that is available to us now to try to make inroads and to try to come face to face with this epidemic and actually do something about it instead of running from it. So my encouragement for you tonight is this: wherever you are at in those stages, it's okay. I want to encourage you. Sometimes we think, I should be in this stage, or my family member should be over here, but they're not. It's okay. Take your time. Take advantage of the resources that are around you. Take advantage of opportunities to get involved with these organizations that work so hard tirelessly. And I just heard today that you got a man here that's been working for 10 years for free to try to make a difference. It's amazing to me. So I just want to encourage you with those words today and let you know that you are loved, and there are people here with their arms wide open that are willing to help you and your families. And none of this, as I said earlier, has to be in vain. So I'm going to ask you, if you would, as we close up tonight, if you would just bow your heads. I'm just going to close us in a word of prayer and ask for a blessing on this group of people here. So if you just do that, I'm just going to pray over us. Lord, we come to you this evening, many of us broken, many of us hurting, many of us grieving. And we pray that, God, you would give us the strength that we need, not only to cope, but to be strong for our families. I pray that you would give us great wisdom to understand how to have conversations that are tough with our kids. I pray that you would give us a boldness to not shrink back, but instead we would address things. And I pray again, Lord, as I did earlier today with somebody out in the other room, I pray for peace for those that are in this room. I pray that through the power of your Holy Spirit, you would bring peace to the people that are here. I pray for restoration of families. And God, more than anything, we pray that you would make yourself evident in our lives, that we might have the strength to move on through what you've called us to do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for that. And Dan, are you coming up to close? Yeah, I'm going to ask Dan Martin to come on up and close us. Thank you.
Okay, once again, I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, our sponsors, all of our participating organizations, and these wonderful people here on the stage for taking the time to come out and share the good work and the good message that's going on in our county and our community. There are some organizations that are still here. Please visit those tables on your way out. I think the Hidden in Plain Sight trailer might be open as well. So if you didn't have an opportunity, please hit that on the way out. So again, thank you so much for coming out, and please, stay safe. Good night.